SEC on CBS sees number 2 Alabama travel to Fayetteville to take on number 20 Arkansas. Nick Saban and the Tide won 15 consecutive games against the Razorbacks, and Sam Pittman hasn't been there for all of them. Heck, even Saban hasn't been there for all of them since the streak dates back all the way to 2006, the year before Nick arrived in Tuscaloosa. But we're excited for this one. Boy, if Arkansas just would have been able to take care of Texas A&M, imagine the hype around this one. It's still big, though. Take a look at the Week 5 SEC slate. Now, this is also one of 4 matchups this week between ranked teams in the top 20 across college football. No respect for the Hogs, catching 17 points at home this week. All right, we're serving up SEC college football with Barrett Sallee. So, Barrett, we're going to start with sort of these themed courses. Let's start with the appetizer for you. What would that be?
Well, I think for this particular weekend in college football, there are just storylines abound in the SEC. And so I think for my appetizer, I think we're going to talk about Drew Sanders, who is the Arkansas linebacker, former 5-star player, played at Alabama, transferred to the Hogs, part of a really good linebacker crew in Fayetteville. I don't think folks recognize just how good Drew Sanders is. The unquestioned leader alongside Bumper Poole, one of the best in terms of tackles for loss in the SEC. He also knows what Bill O'Brien, the offensive coordinator for Alabama, is going to do, how they're going to attack an opposing defense. He's been around this program at Alabama for so long. So the combination of talent and knowledge, the fact that he's maybe a sleeper inside the Arkansas program is, I think, going to really help him, because they're not going to be surprised by anything that Alabama throws out. Stopping it, obviously, is a little bit more of a problem. But I think Drew Sanders in this game, definitely the player to watch, a guy who I don't necessarily think is getting enough love as he deserves, because in reality, he's been one of the best linebackers in the country so far.
All right, what about the main course, like a nice steak and some fingerling potatoes with a little bit of asparagus there?
Well, Chris Rodriguez, the running back, the all-SEC running back for Kentucky, comes back from his 4-game suspension this week, and they're going to need him against Ole Miss on the road in Oxford. Look, I think Kentucky's offense, it's been disjointed. It's been hard to watch. I mean, Will Levis is a good quarterback, but he's not getting any help from his offensive line. I think when Chris Rodriguez comes back, he can pound the rock. He can establish the run that, of course, will help Will Levis work off play action. And then it moves Kavosiey Smoke back to that change-up back role, which, I mean, Kavosiey Smoke's been all right this year, but that is where he thrives as sort of a running mate to Chris Rodriguez. So I think in this game, a lot of eyes are going to be on this game at noon Eastern time in Oxford. You're going to see maybe a different-looking Kentucky offense. I'm really interested to see how things change with Chris Rodriguez. Do they work off play action? How do they get him involved as a receiver out of the backfield, especially over the middle? Because Chris Rodriguez, if he gets open in space, certainly has the ability to hit some home runs. So I think in terms of this game, keep an eye on the running back for the Wildcats. He could play a big role.
It's still early, but it's nice to see Kentucky and even Tennessee, of course, hang there with Georgia in the standings. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Next up, Barrett, is your dessert, which we all think will be sweet, but it could end up being either tart or really salty at the end of the day for one coach.
Yeah. Brian Harsin, man, look, if I don't count the Auburn-Missouri win as a win for Auburn, it's just a non-loss. I don't know if you've seen Necessary Roughness, but it's like when the Texas State Armadillos, they tie Kansas. Rob Schneider says it's a non-loss. I think that's where Brian Harsin is right now. He would have been fired, I think, last Sunday had they lost in overtime to Missouri. I think he'll be fired on Sunday if they lose to LSU, and certainly will be if they lose to Georgia going into the bye week next week. And he's got a tough task. TJ Finley, his quarterback, still not going to play. Robbie Ashford's been banged up. The offensive line has been flat out dreadful. And I think for Auburn, like, look, we all know what happened in February. The boosters tried to go after him. They were unsuccessful. But the blowout loss to Penn State and then the non-loss, like we said, to Missouri last week, really has put him on thin ice. And, you know, you can't fire him after a win or a non-loss. You can fire him if they lose to LSU as 9-point underdogs at home. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think it's going to get sideways.
Great movie reference, by the way. And lastly, leftovers for you.
Georgia, Missouri, man. I can't wait to see what Georgia does after they. I mean, Kent State was down 10 in the fourth quarter. That's better than anybody else has done against Georgia this year, and the majority of last year too. So, do they take it out on Missouri? I think the answer is probably yes. And I think they still want to figure out exactly what goes on in the passing game, who can be consistent. We know Brock Bowers is a freak. They can get him involved in a variety of different ways, but what does Stetson Bennett have to work with outside? Because I don't necessarily think there's been a go-to guy that has stepped up from the receiver position. Obviously, we know what Brock Bowers can do as a tight end, but Missouri is catching Georgia at the exact wrong time. Georgia's 28-point favorites. I think if they cover, Eli Drinkwitz, and I think they will cover, Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach of the Missouri Tigers, might be in some trouble.
All right, Barrett, certainly appreciate it. Catch all of that on CBSSports.com. And just a reminder, of course, the SEC game of the week. Our good friend Jenny Dell will be on the sidelines again, the Tide's second road game of the season. First, of course, against a conference opponent. Everybody remembers that narrow win against Texas earlier in the season. The Razorbacks last defeated Alabama in 2006 at home, 24-23 in overtime, Brandon. And they were led by the dynamic duo of Darren McFadden and Felix Jones.
You know what I want to see is Jenny's throwing burritos again.
Yeah.
What happened last year.
Hand
Working
for an
that
arm.
arm.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.